At the time of this video's release, it will have been around 3 weeks since the release of Death Stranding. In that time, I have pored over the game's cutscenes and supplementary materials to get a better understanding of the game's story and concepts. During my research, I could not help but notice that some of these concepts share remarkable similarity to another gaming franchise, one that Death Stranding's creator, Hideo Kojima, had worked on previously. As many of us already know, Kojima was tapped to direct a new installment in the Silent Hill franchise, a game called Silent Hills. This was announced back in August of 2014 through a playable teaser, literally titled PT, released on the PlayStation Store. Unfortunately, the game was cancelled several months later due to conflicts between Hideo Kojima and the company that he was working for at the time, Konami. Death Stranding became Kojima's next project after leaving Konami. Given the politics surrounding Silent Hill, it seems unlikely that a new entry in the franchise will ever come to pass. If it does, it's very unlikely it would capture the originality and dread of PT. If there is anybody who understands this sad reality best of all, it would be Hideo Kojima. If we consider this unfortunate fact, I think it's reasonable to entertain the possibility that Kojima would take some of the ideas he wanted to use in Silent Hills and carry them over into Death Stranding. Having done extensive research into the Silent Hill franchise with my series titled Silent Hill Mythology, I cannot help but notice that the conclusions I've drawn in some of those videos bear remarkable resemblance to some of the concepts in Death Stranding. Today, I wish to argue that some of the concepts presented in Death Stranding might secretly hint at some of the things Kojima intended to do with Silent Hills. Needless to say, there are spoilers ahead. In order to clearly explain the connection between Death Stranding and Silent Hill, I must present all of you with some of Silent Hill's basic lore, as well as some of my personal research into the series. One of the most common theories about Silent Hill and the horrors it produces is that they come from multiple dimensions. The prime example of this theory is the shifting between the fog world and the more decrepit other world. Even the people who made the Silent Hill movies seem to subscribe to this theory. But let's take a look at what the game developers have said when asked about Silent Hill's lore. According to the Book of Lost Memories, the holy grail of Silent Hill lore, the town of Silent Hill has a power that gives discernible form to people's innermost thoughts. The town is not merely showing the characters their nightmares, but actually manifesting elements of the unconscious mind. When considering this knowledge, one might understandably throw out the multiple dimension theory altogether. But back in November of 2017, I tried to reconcile the multiple dimension theory with the established canon. The basic hypothesis I presented in this video is as follows. If the horrors of Silent Hill are manifesting elements of one's unconscious mind, maybe the products of our mind take physical form in another dimension. Silent Hill serves as the bridge point between our world and that other dimension. I can already hear some of you scoffing at how ludicrous this sounds, but you won't be laughing by the time I switch over to Death Stranding. Moreover, there are people much smarter than myself who have proposed something similar to this, except those proposals weren't in regards to video games or fiction in general, but our very reality. In that video I did on multiple dimensions, I presented a theory by the famous Swiss psychoanalyst Carl Jung, a theory called synchronicity. According to him, synchronicity occurs when your thoughts and dreams match up with events in your everyday life. In layman's terms, synchronicity is kind of like deja vu. If you have trouble understanding what this means, I'll give you the example I cited in that video. During a therapy session, one of Carl Jung's patients told him about a dream she had the night before. In this dream, she was given a piece of jewelry that looked like a golden scarab. After telling Jung about this dream, they both heard an insect tapping against his cabinet window. When Jung caught the insect in his hands, he discovered it was a golden scarab, a very rare presence for the climate he was living in at the time. This event actually happened. It isn't fiction. It seems that a product of this woman's unconscious mind showed up in reality. Granted, some people would pass this off as a highly unlikely coincidence, and that's fair enough. However, keep in mind that the point of this video is not to debate the scientific validity of synchronicity. I am merely using the concept to illustrate how the world of Silent Hill functions. The key point of the synchronicity theory is, to use Jung's words, that the psyche is in part the material world, and that the material world is in part the psyche. In my multiple dimension theory video, I illustrated this point with the following diagram. The black circle on the right represents your unconscious mind. The white circle on the left represents your conscious mind, and the gray circle in the middle represents the bridging between the two. When you have a thought, or a dream, or an intuition, where do these things come from? Well, they come from the unconscious mind. They literally pop out of nowhere, out of a formless void. In the world of Silent Hill, this mental process is reflected externally. The white circle reflects objective, knowable reality. The black circle reflects subjective, unknowable reality. As you move from one side to the other, reality is no longer fixed. It will shift and take on new forms. For instance, these monsters that could only be produced by some sort of twisted unconscious mind bleed into our reality, or rather the reality of the game. As I just stated, this bleeding into reality is a lot like how a thought pops into our consciousness out of nowhere. Silent Hill is the bridge point between the singular objective dimension that we all inhabit and the multiple dimensions that are subjective to each character. Now, what do I mean by dimensions subjective to each character? Well, when entering Silent Hill, as I said, reality starts to break down. It starts to become subjective. What one person sees might not be what another person sees. It is subjective to the perceiver. This is why, according to the game's official lore, the monsters which certain characters see might look different to other people. For example, the monster known as the Abstract Daddy in Silent Hill 2 looks a certain way to the character of Angela, while looking different to the main character of James. In summary, the whole Silent Hill franchise can be seen as a play on the synchronicity theory. Just like the mind has a conscious and unconscious side, the universe has an objective physical side and a subjective formless side. The objective side has one dimension, while the subjective side has multiple. And in the subjective side, there is a dimension connected to each person, and that dimension is given form through our thoughts. I understand some of this may sound far-fetched, but now is where things pay off. While playing Death Stranding, I found the concept of beaches shared remarkable congruity with my perception of Silent Hill. Allow me to play you this clip from the game when Hartman explains beaches to Sam. This is the scene that occurs after Sam was transported to a battlefield reminiscent of World War II. Tell me if it doesn't sound pretty much like everything I just said.
As you might have suspected, time here stopped while you two were on that battlefield. If my thinking is correct, the dimension to which you traveled is a kind of beach. To explain a little, our bodies, our ha, all occupy the same world, but our souls, our ka, have beaches all their own. These beaches are given form inside our brains by our beliefs, religion, philosophy, and so forth. As a result, a beach can be anything, and those anythings form a multiverse.
Let us recap. In regards to Silent Hill, I said that the town was the meeting place between our objective conscious reality and the subjective unconscious reality that gives form to our thoughts. A beach in Death Stranding, as Hartman said, is much like that subjective plane. It is given form by our brains, by our thoughts. For every brain, there is a dimension, a beach, that inhabits that formless unconscious void. With 7 billion brains put together, you have multiple universes, or to use Hartman's briefer term, a multiverse. Now let's assume that I'm right about all of this. Let's assume that the way I perceive the world of Silent Hill is the same way that Kojima perceives it. How would Kojima have used this perception if he was able to complete Silent Hills? Well, I think it's in the name itself. Silent Hills. For most of the Silent Hill saga, the stories focused primarily on giving form to a singular person's unconscious thoughts. For Silent Hill 1, it was Alessa's thoughts. For Silent Hill 2, it was James's thoughts. Granted, there were times where people's subjective dimensions crossed paths, like with the aforementioned Abstract Daddy example, but this concept wasn't usually the primary focus. I theorize that Kojima wanted to explore this angle more in Silent Hills. It would be one person cycling through multiple dimensions, through the personal hells of multiple minds, or the multiple hells of a singular mind. We'll never know. One need not look any further than the gameplay we saw in PT. Multiple versions of the same hallway. There might have been multiple versions of the main characters as well, each existing in an infinite number of dimensions. This possibility is reinforced by what the brown paper bag says at the beginning of the teaser.
I walked. I could do nothing but walk. And then I saw me walking in front of myself. But it wasn't really me. Watch out. The gap in the door. It's a separate reality. The only me is me. Are you sure the only you is you?
To drive the point home, the entangling of multiple realities is a concept explored in Death Stranding. Hartman continues with the following.
However, if many people die at once, their beaches can become entangled, creating a strand field. This phenomenon is exacerbated in wartime by omnipresent feelings of resentment and despair. Beaches are more easily and frequently entangled. On such a beach, exits vanish and experiences cycle endlessly.
Exits vanishing? Cycling endlessly? Sounds familiar, does it not? What about the fact that such an occurrence only happens when several bad events and feelings occur simultaneously? Sounds like Silent Hill to me. It seems that the connections between Death Stranding and Silent Hills go beyond the mere inclusion of the same actors and creators. I wonder if there are more connections like this that haven't been discovered yet. What else might Kojima be trying to say about Silent Hills secretly through Death Stranding? One person pointed out to me that the character Mads Mikkelsen plays, Cliff, has a dead wife named Lisa. The decrepit-looking woman who follows you throughout PT is also named Lisa. Maybe there's something there. But then again, maybe it's nothing. Who knows? To conclude this video, I'd like to briefly address the validity of the synchronicity concept. Even if it isn't valid, and anything that could be called synchronicity is merely a collection of coincidences, it's nonetheless a fun concept to think about. For me personally, I had a somewhat synchronous moment while playing Death Stranding and also making this video. For much of my life, I had been troubled by the various conflicts of religion in the present and in history. I remember when I was a child, I had a secret wish. I hoped that in death, the conflicts we have had over religion would be rendered useless. That in death, whether you were Buddhist or Christian or Muslim or whatever, you would go to the afterlife you believed in. I assumed that other people might have had the same idea I did, but unfortunately, I never came across them. When I heard Hartman say that a person's brain gave form to their respective afterlife, that one's afterlife was shaped by one's religion and philosophy, I felt enlightened, validated, but also puzzled by a nagging question. Was this a coincidence? Or was this synchronicity?